My mother married a man she met online, and I didn't find out until she showed me the wedding photo on her phone like it was something to celebrate. She was beaming. He was standing next to her in a courthouse hallway in a blazer he had bought the week before with money she had wired him. And I stood there in her kitchen holding that phone, looking at her face, trying to find the right words, and what came out was nothing. Because what I was actually thinking was that by the time I found out about the wedding, he had already gotten her to sign 3 documents she could not explain to me. 3 documents that had already set something legal in motion that would take 4 months and 2 attorneys to stop. And my mother, even after she knew everything, even after she saw the proof with her own eyes, still told me I had humiliated her. That's the part I haven't told most people, not the fraud, the fact that she blamed me anyway. My father died 4 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to gone. My mother, Carol, was 64 years old and had been with my dad since she was 19. She did not know how to pay a bill online. She did not know where he kept the insurance policies. She had built her entire identity inside of a marriage, and when that marriage ended, there was no structure left underneath her. I have one brother, Derek, who lives in Phoenix. I'm in Ohio, 40 minutes from my mom's house, which meant I was the one who drove over after the funeral and stayed for 2 weeks sorting paperwork, closing accounts, sitting with her while she stared at the chair he used to sit in. Derek sent flowers and called twice a week and told me I was doing such a good job handling everything. That should have told me something about how the rest of this story was going to go. My mother did okay for a while. She had church friends, women she'd known for 30 years. She had her garden. She had my kids on weekends, which she lived for. She and my Aunt Roberta went to a women's retreat at their church, and she came home looking lighter. People in her congregation adored her. She was that woman, gracious, warm, the one who remembered your birthday and brought food when you were sick. But okay and happy are not the same thing. And I watched her drift, year by year, into something smaller. She started apologizing for things that didn't need apologizing for. She stopped wearing color. She told me once, standing at the sink, not looking at me, that she felt embarrassed by how much she missed having someone next to her at night. Not someone specifically, just the fact of another body, another presence. She said the house made sounds at night she'd never noticed when your father was here. I said, "Mom, you don't have to be embarrassed about that." And then I changed the subject because I didn't know how to stay inside that sentence with her. That was my first mistake. She was telling me exactly how exposed she was, and I handed the subject back to her like it was too heavy to hold. She met Kieran 14 months after my dad died. She didn't tell me right away. She mentioned a friend online for 3 months before she admitted it was a man. He was 41. She was 68. He lived in Pune, India. He had, according to my mother, the most respectful, old-fashioned way of speaking she had ever encountered. I did not respond the way a good daughter would. And I have made peace with that. The first time she showed me his messages, I felt something cold move through me. Not because they were inappropriate, because they were engineered. Every message read like a man who had studied what lonely American women in their late 60s needed to hear and had practiced delivering it. He called her a woman of rare grace. He talked endlessly about his mother, about being raised to honor mature women, about how Western men didn't deserve them. He wrote things like, "Speaking with you quiets something in me I had forgotten how to quiet." My mother did not just believe those messages. She memorized them. She read them back to me like scripture. Within 6 weeks, they were video calling every day. Within 3 months, she was waking up at 5 in the morning to match his time zone. She lost 11 pounds. She bought a kurta top from Amazon because he told her it would suit her, and she wore it to Sunday service and told her friend Beverly that someone special had suggested it. Beverly apparently told her she looked wonderful. My mother told me this story like it was a beautiful thing. She was glowing in this awful, fragile way that made me feel like I was watching someone sleepwalk toward the edge of something. I tried to bring it up once. She shut me down mid-sentence. "He is not after my money, Lauren. He is not that kind of man." I hadn't said money. I hadn't gotten to any specific concern yet. She had already rehearsed the defense. She had already decided what I was going to say and prepared to dismiss it. Then came the first wire transfer, $800, his mother's medical bills. When she told me, it was casual, almost annoyed at having to mention it, like she expected me to make it into something. I asked how she'd sent it. She showed me the app on her phone, an international transfer app she had downloaded and set up herself. My mother, who 2 years earlier had called me in a panic because she couldn't figure out how to attach a photo to an email, had learned to wire money overseas for a man she had never touched. I called Derek that night. He said, "She's a grown woman, Lauren. You can't manage her life." And I wanted to reach through the phone. She told me he was applying for a visitor visa. By the time he was approved and had a flight booked, she had sent him just over $4,000. I know that number because I eventually found the receipts. She told me it was $2,000. She was already keeping a separate set of facts for him and a separate set of facts for me. He was handsome in this quiet, deliberate way. Tall, composed, not flashy. He had a stillness about him that I spent weeks trying to name before I finally understood what it was. It wasn't peace. It was the particular calm of someone who has done this before and already knows how it ends. He shook my hand when we met and held eye contact for exactly the right amount of time. He complimented my children by name, information my mother had clearly given him in advance. He brought gifts, a silk scarf for me, a wooden toy for my son. He ate everything that was served and praised my mother's cooking to the table. He told Derek that you could feel the warmth in the family the moment you walked in. Derek laughed and said, "That was Carol, man. That's just who she is." I watched my brother go soft in real time. I watched my mother stand up straighter than she had in years, and I could not find a single thing to point at, which was exactly the problem. The moment that snagged in me was small. During dinner, while Derek was talking, Kieran's eyes moved around the room. Not anxiously, methodically. He looked at the bookshelves, the framed photos on the wall, the side table with the mail stacked on it, the fireplace mantel with my parents' wedding portrait, and the little ceramic dish where my mom kept her spare key. He looked at everything the way a person looks when they are building a floor plan in their head. Not curiosity, assessment. When my daughter knocked her juice across the table, he was the first one out of his chair. He cleaned it up quickly, told her it was completely fine, looked at her with this easy warmth. My mother beamed at him like he had just performed a miracle. I sat there with my hands in my lap thinking, he knew we were watching. That night, I asked how long he was planning to stay. My mother said they hadn't set a hard date yet. She said it like it was obvious, like of course they hadn't. He was there 6 weeks before I noticed the first real shift. My mom stopped calling me in the mornings. She started returning my calls hours later, sometimes after 9 at night. When I came over, Kieran was always present, always polite. He would bring me coffee without asking, then sit nearby, quiet, pleasant, watching. He started saying we. We were thinking about repainting the kitchen. We want to go somewhere warm in January. We spoke with someone at the bank about updating some accounts. I stopped him on that one. I said, "What do you mean, updating accounts?" My mother jumped in fast. "Just bill pay," she said. Kieran had helped her set up proper online access. Kieran smiled at me and said, "I just want to make sure she is taken care of, Lauren. I know you worry about her. I worry too." Calm on the surface. Underneath, a door closing in my face. One evening, my mother went to the kitchen to refill drinks, and Kieran and I were alone at the table for less than 2 minutes. He looked at me, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse, and said, "You've been carrying this family for a long time, since your father. That kind of weight changes a person." I didn't respond. He tilted his head slightly like he was considering something and added, "Your mother worries about you too. She says things have been hard in your marriage for a while now." I hadn't told my mother that, not in any specific way. It wasn't even fully true. But the way he said it, not gossiping, cataloging, made me feel like he had reached into something private and turned it over in his hands to see what it might be worth. By the time my mother came back with the glasses, he was talking about something completely different and smiling pleasantly. I don't think she noticed that I didn't speak again for the rest of the visit. Within weeks, things I had said in private to my mother were coming back to me distorted. She would say things like, "Kieran feels like you've never given him a real chance." Or, "Kieran mentioned he's noticed you always seem to bring up finances when you visit." He was revising me inside her mind, slowly, without fingerprints, one planted sentence at a time. He told my mother I was too controlling and that it came from unprocessed grief about losing my father. He said it like a therapist, like a man who understood our family better than we did, and my mother, who had watched me sleep on her couch for 2 weeks after my dad died so she wouldn't be alone, took his interpretation and accepted it completely. Derek told me he'd heard the same thing from Mom. He said, "Look, Lauren, Kieran seems like he genuinely cares about her. Maybe you need to consider that you're not being objective here." He said it gently, like he was doing me a favor. Like Kieran hadn't spent 6 weeks carefully making sure he was the easier one to believe. And here's what nobody tells you about that moment. You can't scream. You can't cry. Because if you get emotional, you prove the point they've already made about you. I drove home and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, in the dark, because the specific helplessness of watching someone be dismantled one layer at a time is not something there are good words for. Meanwhile, my mother was telling her church friends about him. Beverly, Roberta, the women in her Sunday group. She was glowing when she talked about him, apparently. Beverly had even taken a photo at a Sunday social, one of those church community gatherings where Kieran had attended twice, standing next to my mother, charming and warm and completely at ease. Beverly posted the photo to the church's community Facebook page with a caption about new beginnings. It had 43 likes. My mother's friends from 30 years of her life had clicked a heart on her happiness, and Kieran had been standing right there, smiling, knowing exactly what kind of witness he was building. Roberta told me later that Carol had said she finally understood what it felt like to feel chosen. That word, chosen. She used it in front of people who had known her for decades, and Kieran knew she was telling them. He had encouraged it, because the more witnesses there were to her happiness, the more it would cost her to admit she'd been wrong. The week before I found the emails, my mother mentioned casually that Kieran had been asking questions about the house, specifically whether the deed was still in both my parents' names or had been transferred after my father died. She said he wanted to make sure she was protected legally in case anything happened to her. She said it like he was being thoughtful. I asked her what she had told him. She said she'd shown him the paperwork. I asked which paperwork. She got vague. She said just the deed, she thought. Maybe something about the mortgage. I sat with that feeling for 3 days without knowing what to do with it. Then I found the emails. I was at her house to drop off paperwork from Derek, something about a property tax assessment. She and Kieran had gone to the grocery store. I was waiting in the kitchen. Her laptop was open on the table. I set the folder down and started to walk away. And then I saw the subject line on the open tab. The name on the email account was not Kieran's, but the profile photo was his face. I stood there for 15 seconds. Then I looked. It was a message thread with a woman named Priya, written in English, which I later understood was intentional. English between them was plausible deniability if someone saw the screen. The content was not plausible deniability. She asked if it was going according to plan. He said the paperwork stage would begin shortly. She told him not to rush the legal part because it would look suspicious. He said, "She trusts me completely. The daughter is difficult, but the son is easy. I know what I am doing." My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter. I kept scrolling. There was a photograph embedded in one of the messages, a woman holding a baby. The woman was beautiful. The baby had his eyes. He had written beneath the photo, "Soon, John, I promise. This is the last door we need." I heard the garage door. I stepped back. I picked up the folder. I walked to the living room and sat down. And when my mother came through the door carrying grocery bags, smiling at me, I smiled back. Kieran nodded at me pleasantly. I said something about traffic on the way over. I stayed for 20 minutes. I hugged my mother at the door. I drove to a parking lot 2 miles away and sat in my car shaking for half an hour. I needed proof. I needed to understand exactly what door he was talking about before he knew I had looked through it. 2 weeks of research. His full name, the email address, the phone number cross-referenced against his Facebook profiles. He had two. One under Kiran Mehta, one under Kiran Mehta, slightly different spelling, mostly private. The private one had photos of a wedding. Large, elaborate, traditional. The bride was Priya. The photos were 4 years old. A pinned post from 2 years ago. A birth announcement. A baby boy. Named. Photographed. Very much real. He had a wife. He had a son. He had a family that was waiting for the door he kept promising to open. I found an expat forum thread, a long one, warnings from multiple women about a specific pattern. Older American women, widowed or divorced, financially stable, romantic contact online, visitor visa, marriage, spousal petition for green card, then either disappearance into the system or slow financial extraction in the interim. Several of the women described men who were charming in a weirdly studied way, who talked constantly about their mothers and about honoring women, who moved fast but made it feel slow. My mother wasn't the first. She was a pattern. Then I found one more email, a longer message he had forwarded to someone for advice. He described my mother as useful and deeply lonely, which makes her cooperative. He described her house as well-situated and already paid for. He wrote, "She will not resist once she believes this is love. Women like her never do." Women like her. I read that line 6 times. I thought about my mother buying that kurta top. I thought about her waking up at 5 in the morning to talk to him. I thought about her telling Roberta she finally felt chosen. I thought about what it costs a 68-year-old widow to say that word out loud to people who knew her when she was someone's whole world. He had looked at that vulnerability and seen a logistics problem to solve. I did it on a Sunday. I asked Derek to drive in from Phoenix. He came, skeptical but present. I had printed everything, the emails, the wedding photos, the birth announcement, the forum thread. I had a folder. I sat at that kitchen table feeling like I was about to detonate something that would hurt everyone in the room, including me. Kiran was in the house. I asked him to sit with us. My mother looked at me the way she used to when I was 12 and about to say something she'd already decided she didn't want to hear. That preemptive disappointment. She could already feel what was coming. I put the papers in the center of the table without speaking. I let her look. I watched her eyes move across the wedding photo and stop. I watched her face do something complicated and then go very still. She looked at Kiran. He was calm. He said, "Where did you get these, Lauren?" I said, "You have a wife. You have a son. Her name is Priya." He looked at my mother, not at me, at my mother, and said, "Carol, let me explain what these are." And my mother said, "Lauren, let him explain." Something inside me went very quiet and very cold. He delivered it all smoothly. The wedding was arranged, cultural, never a real marriage. Priya was a family obligation. They had been separated for years. The child's paternity was uncertain. The messages had been taken out of context. John was a casual term between old friends. My investigation, he said, had been driven by hostility, which had led me to misread everything. He said it like he was correcting a misunderstanding, not defending himself, like I was the one who owed the room an apology. My mother nodded. She actually nodded while he was talking. Derek said, "Kiran, if the marriage isn't valid, that should be easy to prove. Show us documentation." Kiran looked at Derek with something that was almost, not quite, but almost, a smile. He said, "Derek, your sister has been trying to end your mother's happiness since the day I arrived. You've seen it. You've always seen it. You've just been too kind to say it." That sentence, that specific sentence, he was still working. In that room, with the evidence laid out on the table, he was still turning to find the easier target. I stood up. I put my finger on the printed page. I read it out loud. "She trusts me completely. The daughter is difficult, but the son is easy. I know what I am doing." I said, That is a direct quote from you to your wife." The room went silent in a way that had texture. My mother started crying. And here's the part I have to say out loud because I think it needs to be said. She did not cry at him. She cried at me. She told me I had gone through her private things. She told me I had humiliated her in her own home, in front of her children. She said, and I will hear this for the rest of my life, "You have never been able to stand seeing me be someone's first choice." She said it like she meant it. She said it like he had given it to her weeks ago, wrapped it carefully, and she had been carrying it around waiting for this exact moment. Kieran stood up and walked to the bedroom to pack. No drama, no raised voice, no scrambling. And as he passed me in the hallway, he stopped. He didn't touch me. He just looked at me with an expression that was almost patient and said, very quietly, "You spent all this energy trying to save her. Did you ever once ask what she wanted to be saved from?" Then he walked into the bedroom and closed the door gently behind him, like a man who had made his point and had nothing left to prove. It was the coldest thing in the room. Not because it was true, because it was designed to live in me, and it did. My brother sat at the kitchen table and said nothing, not one word. He looked at the papers, he looked at his hands. He did not look at me. He left that night. My mother barely spoke for 4 days. When she did speak, it was to tell me I had destroyed something she needed. She did not say she believed him, but she stopped just short of saying she believed me. She lived in that space between, the place where shame lives, because believing me fully meant acknowledging that the man who called her a woman of rare grace had also written about her like she was a supply chain problem. Derek went home. He texted me, "I think you were right, but I also think you could have handled it with more compassion. Not for Kieran, for Mom." He was saying I should have been more compassionate toward the woman who had just called me jealous of her happiness, while a con man packed his bags 20 feet away. I didn't respond to that text for 3 weeks. My mother went back to church after about 2 weeks, and this is the part that still sits in me wrong. Beverly didn't ask questions. Roberta checked in once, carefully. But that Facebook photo, the one from the church social, the one with 43 likes, was still up. My mother had to walk back into that congregation and smile at every single person who had clicked a heart on her new beginning. Women who had watched her grieve my father for years, who had seen her come back to life over this man, who had witnessed her happiness publicly and commented on it. She had to face all of them. Not one of them brought it up directly. They became very careful around her instead. The particular kindness of people who know everything and are choosing to say nothing. And somehow that silence was its own kind of humiliation. You could see the shape of what had happened in every conversation that carefully avoided its center. She called me one morning and asked me to come help her clean out the guest room. We didn't speak about him at all. We washed the sheets. We opened the windows. She found a charging cable he had left behind and she held it for a moment, just stood there holding it, and then dropped it in the trash. I watched her do that and I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth until the feeling passed. She never said thank you. I've thought about that a lot. Not bitterly, I think, just honestly, because gratitude would have required looking at the full picture, and the full picture had a line in it about women like her, and she was not ready to hold that. Maybe she will never be fully ready, and I have decided that is allowed. 3 weeks after he left, I got a call from an immigration attorney I had never spoken to. He was calling to follow up on a spousal visa petition. Already filed 6 weeks earlier, while Kieran was living in that house, sleeping in the guest room, drinking coffee with my mother every morning, bringing me unsolicited cups, and watching me with that polite, careful attention. My mother had signed a co-petitioner affidavit. She had submitted proof of relationship, proof of cohabitation, proof of financial support. She had provided her social security information. She had done it all herself, willingly, because he had explained what each document was, and she had believed him. She told me later she thought she was signing paperwork so he could extend his stay. She said those exact words, extend his stay. Like she was filling out a form for a hotel. He had filed the petition before I ever sat down at that table, before I printed a single page. The process was already running. Unwinding it took 4 months, 2 attorneys, and a formal objection process that required my mother to go on record, in writing with her name on it, stating that she had been manipulated by the man she was still, in some private part of herself, not fully ready to call what he was. The petition was eventually withdrawn. He disappeared from contact entirely. The immigration case was closed. We never heard from him again. I don't know where he went. I don't know if he found another door. I think about that sometimes. Some other woman, somewhere, waking up at 5 in the morning to match his time zone, learning a new app, feeling chosen for the first time in years. I hope I'm wrong. I think I'm not. People ask me sometimes whether my mother ever came around, whether there was a moment of clarity, a conversation where she looked at me and said the words. There wasn't a clean one. There was a slow dissolving. Over months, she stopped saying his name. She started saying, "my mistake," when that period came up. Vaguely, carefully, like the mistake had been abstract. Bad judgment, a bad season, not a specific man who had looked at her grief like it was a resource and taken notes. I understand that. I do. Because the complete version of the truth requires her to sit with the fact that her loneliness made her easy, that her hunger to feel chosen made her protective of the person exploiting that hunger, that the shame she'd felt about being old and alone was exactly the thing he had used against her, and that she had helped him do it. He wasn't brilliant. He wasn't some criminal mastermind. He was a man who understood something very specific and very true about her, that she had confused being treated with respect for being safe, that she would work very hard not to believe something that humiliated her, that the people who loved her had let her tell them she was embarrassed about being lonely and then changed the subject. He didn't need to be extraordinary. He just needed her to be lonely enough and ashamed enough of that loneliness and surrounded by people who meant well but looked away. She was all of those things. She had been for years, and I had been close enough to see it and not close enough to stop it. I still don't know who I'm angrier at. I'm starting to think the answer is something I'm not ready to say out loud yet either.